Um, Lucia is really such an inspirational person, and I have had the opportunity to meet Lucia when I was in Mexico City. I'm living there right now, and her story is just an incredible one. She is such of courage and persistence. Okay, um, I would like to set the context a little bit about what is going on in Mexico. Since 2006, since the war on drugs started, there are statistics coming from the government that said up to 250,000 people have died, but this is a low estimate, and some people even say it's between 250,000 and 500,000 people have been killed in Mexico since the war on drugs began. And Lucia is going to talk about the missing. Official number of missing or disappeared in Mexico is 40,000, but you can triple or even quadruple that. There is no transparency. There is massive violence. And ever since the war on drugs began and the fracturing of the cartels, the violence has just escalated. 2019 is on record to be the most violent year in Mexico. And this is not a country that is far away, obviously. This is our neighbor. And according to the Washington Post last year, they posted an article saying that parts of Mexico are as dangerous as Yemen and Syria. And this is absolutely true. Okay? And last year it was reported that 5 of the 6 most dangerous cities in the world are also in Mexico. So you can see the violence is staggering. And before Lucia speaks, I would like to say that there is a misconception. There's a misconception that this is just a war between the government and the narcos, or this is a war on drugs, or just there's so much more to it. We're talking about state violence and state repression. We're talking about people, the civilian population of Mexico, caught in the middle of this war. So they're living in war zones. And the majority of the people that are victimized in Mexico, including Lucia's son, they're innocent victims of government policy and narco-terrorism. Okay, so I'm just setting a little bit of the context of the situation. It is a very, very grave situation. And I hope that what you will take out of this lecture is to think about a couple of things. Think about how you can contribute in the smallest way possible. And for Lucia and for many others, the most important thing is spreading awareness, spreading the word, what is going on. Because this is like it's not a secret, but it's something that is not coming out. For whatever reason, this information about the massive violence in Mexico is not on the front pages. Okay, not like other situations in the world. And another thing you can do is listen to her intently, listen to like what she has to say. It's a very personal story, it's a very tragic story, but it's also a very inspirational story of what Lucia has taken and the struggle that she keeps on going with the other mothers of Veracruz. So without further delay, I would like to present Lucia, and I would like to first thank her for coming and thank her for being such an inspiration. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Oh, it's a little high for me. Yeah, but I think I'm using the other one. Yeah. So just your being here means a lot to me. Your presence itself is, for me, is you cannot imagine how much hope it brings to me to have people, young people here participating in this. It's simply really blows my mind. I wouldn't have imagined that you'd be interested, in participating in this for some reason. It's not that I don't trust or that I have any kind of misconception, but I really appreciate you being here, and I feel at home, although I'm far away from Mexico. I'm going to talk about the missing persons, the enormous humanitarian catastrophe that Mexico is undergoing at this moment. And that has been going on for quite a while. In my case, it began with the kidnapping of my son, Luis Guillermo. It happened in 2013, in June, and it's the moment that my life changed completely. It was completely different, my life before. So I have one before and after that is so dramatic. The difference that you wouldn't believe how much your life changes when something like this happens to you. Because this is not like having a family member that you lose because he was sick, and then sometimes you even find relief in the fact that the person is not suffering anymore. No. This is so terrible to live with the uncertainty, with the pain, with the pressing need to do things in order to find them, and in general, a very deep-rooted anguish, So it's I don't want anybody, not even I don't have enemies, but if I did, I wouldn't want this on them. So if sometimes I find it hard to communicate what I want. It's it's hard. But I mean to be clear. And if there's any question, please, you'll have the chance to ask, and please do, because we need everything to be very, very, very precise. Let's see. After I went through my son's kidnapping, I noticed that in Mexico there is no investigation. There is no let's say that the authorities are not going to do anything in order to find the missing people. So I decided, and I found some of the mothers that were going through the same thing, and I started this little colectivo, this group of mothers. It began as a group of WhatsApp. In the beginning, it was mainly about the emotional support, because one of the things that you find is that there's a terrible stigma attached to the disappearances. People don't want to talk about it, and the society turns their back because of the government narrative. Government tells people that the disappeared were criminals. Not necessarily, and in most cases it's not true. And why? Because the government wants to wash their hands of the problem. And besides, it's good to have the rest of society feel that they have nothing to fear, because this is aimed at criminals. So that way it serves two purposes. So like I said earlier, I fell victim to the government narrative. I thought my son was safe because my son was not a criminal and he was not a drug addict, didn't do any drugs, and I thought that nothing would happen to him. They kidnapped him for ransom, and I thought that also you had to be very rich to be kidnapped. And he was not rich, but he had some money, and that was enough. They don't send the kidnappers don't send the victims back because they don't care. Impunity in Mexico is 99% high. Means that nothing is going to happen to kidnappers. So in the beginning, like I told you before, it was a very small group, and we were basically trying to figure out what to do, because it's something. It was the first group in Veracruz, and we had no idea what to do, how to address this terrible tragedy. And but we started figuring out, as we went along, that we needed to change things. We needed for the government to be accountable and to do something. And we started putting pressure on the government. That was at least to get them to do the basics, maybe the protocol, to get the DNA samples from the family. What you think is little, but for us, it took a lot of work. So the range of the missing in the group go from 72, the oldest, and a grandmother of 72, she went missing, and the little child too. The rest is very young. We have here, this is like a collage of the pictures. My son is all the way up with the glasses and the jacket. Like you see, imagine this picture, just looking at all those faces is shocking for me to see so many lives under this. Let me give you a little context about Veracruz so that you know that it's not just a little town far away. No. Veracruz is a very important city. And the state is one of the most important states in Mexico. 28,000 square miles, and it's 8 million inhabitants. It's a coastline, most of it. So it's one of the leading economies in Mexico. It has oil, it has agriculture, cattle, everything. Very rich state, and it has some of the worst violence in the country. The beginning of the end. We have these three governors, but especially these two. They became accomplices to cartels, and the center of the problems in Mexico is corruption. So you had these people, especially this one, Fidel Herrera. He was supposed to be the leader of a cartel. And these were the governors that we elected and hired to rule in the state, and they turned out against the people. That was the situation in Veracruz, so there's nobody to turn to when the person in charge of the state is one of the first criminals. You can see here, it says the FBI detected narco gobierno, the governors that are working for the cartels. And you have corruption involves 11 governors. But in Mexico, there's 32 states in one district. I can tell you most of those states are governed by corrupt people. Right now, they changed the government, and I hope this time they get better people than before. So the problem here, the center, we have the war on drugs. It's in December 2006, Felipe Calderon was the president, and he declared, just like that, didn't do any kind of investigation, didn't analyze things, because he had to go little by little, check how are the police forces, and he had no idea that the police in Mexico are corrupt, and if they are not corrupt, they are not trained. And very quickly, they turned their backs against the government and started working for the cartels too. So he declared the war on drugs. And this declaration brought calamity on Mexico. Impunity, like I told you before, 99%. Official figure, this is not my invention, it's official. So imagine for you to have justice in Mexico, what has to happen? It has to be, I suppose it's easier to win the lotto than to get justice in Mexico. The corruption, like I said before, the authorities collude with the organized crime. And in general, it's you cannot trust most of the authorities. And the victims, very young, from 14 to 25, is the range of, let's say, the average of the ages of the victims. In Veracruz, most of the victims were let's say, the crimes were perpetrated by the police. The state went against the people. And why? For different reasons. In some cases, they had this social cleansing when they decide to do away with the young people because they decide, okay, this person is not going to amount to anything good, so let's nip it in the bud. So that's what they do. And it happened to many teenagers and young adults. They were conducting raids on the streets, and just by walking on the street, they would pick you up and disappear you. That's the way they worked in Veracruz. We had like the context of the war on drugs. You can see this cartoons. The demand is huge, and well, there's the supply. What can you do? I mean, once you, Hillary Clinton said the insatiable appetite of Americans for drugs. It's not all Americans, of course, but she said it like that. It's impossible to stop the supply. And the way it goes, Mexico or the cartels send the drugs to the United States, and the United States send money and weapons to Mexico. Over here it says, we accidentally delivered weapons to ISIS. How did it happen? We mistook him for a Mexican cartel. They do send thousands, and I'm telling you what's horrifying is that thousands of weapons get into Mexico on a daily basis from the United States. So how can you stop violence? And those weapons don't fall in the hands of innocent people. They go directly to the cartels and to all these criminals. And you have the easy pass, how when people come into into the United States from Mexico, they check the vehicles, they check everything, and when things come into Mexico, it's the other way around. They don't do any checking, and all the weapons, like I told you, thousands on a daily basis. And I don't know if you remember the Operation Fast and Furious, how they transported all these weapons to Mexico with the participation of the authorities in the United States. And they were supposed to be tracking these weapons in Mexico. Of course, they lost track of all the weapons. Sure, thousands of weapons fell in the hands of criminals, and then that's it. That case particularly was brought to Congress, and but didn't do anything. Obama found out about it and didn't do anything either. So nobody was sanctioned. Nobody was sent to jail for this operation in Mexico, which was criminal. And but it happens all the time. But that particular operation was supposed to be carried out to analyze the security situation in Mexico. The enforced disappearances. Enforced disappearance, by definition, is when the state participates either directly or indirectly. You have, for example, by omission, that they don't do anything to stop the criminal or the perpetrator from committing the crime, the disappearance, or they just turn a blind eye, because, of course, they are accomplices of the criminals, or when they are involved personally. And it happens most of the time that the state participates directly in the disappearances. And in Veracruz, most of the disappearances are carried out by the state. We have here the official figures. These official figures are really it's unrealistic. They say over 40,000 missing persons. It's not true at all, because, for example, in Veracruz alone, there must be 20,000. So in this figure, 40,000 Veracruz participates with fewer than 1,000 disappeared. And in the Colectivo, we have over 300. So that doesn't have any logic to it. In Mexico, there has to be at least 150,000 disappeared or missing. Unidentified bodies in the morgues, we have, it says there 26,000. Now they corrected the figure, 36. And I suppose if they keep correcting it, it's going to be higher and higher. And those bodies are unidentified because they don't follow the protocols. They don't try to find the families of the people that are in the morgues or in some of the common graves. Common graves are legal. They are like huge graves that they make and just, it's horrible to say like this, but they dump the bodies in these graves and they don't have an identification. They have nothing, just bury them like that. Over 2,500 clandestine graves until last year. This year alone, over 700 have been found. So the problems with the data in Mexico. In Mexico, it's very difficult to get reliable information on what's happening. One of the reasons is that families don't report the cases because they fear retaliation, and if they have more family members, they are scared that something might happen to them, and also they don't trust the authorities. It's like what they tell me is like they're going to give the information to the perpetrators, so they try to stay away from authorities. You have also there's a lot of criminalization and re-victimization. If the victims are the ones that the police are going to investigate, and usually not in a good way. That's why people don't report the cases. You have one case is reported out of every 10, and that's what they say. That's the official figure in Mexico in general. But the truth is, I think it's over 1 in 10. It has to be like maybe one report out of every 20, 25, which is makes it very difficult to have a reliable figure. We have the sexist context. When women go missing, it's unbelievable, but families don't look for the girls when they are missing because there's still a worse stigma attached to the disappearances of women. So there's a lot of feminicides too, but those are usually, they just kill them and they don't disappear them. But the problem with girls and the disappearances is the families don't want to look for them because they fear for their reputation. So you have also, there's the problem of the burial of the bodies in common graves. They don't perform any autopsies. They don't try to do any kind of identification of the bodies. So it's they just pile up and they don't do anything. They don't follow any kind of protocol. So there's also the lack of resources, which I think is part of the problem, but not necessarily. If they really had, because Mexico's a rich country, and they should be able to do all this, but there's no will to do it. So you have less of the 20% of the bodies stored in morgues get an ID, and they have inefficient and inadequate, let's say, storage. For example, in Veracruz, we have the morgue is supposed to store 40 bodies. And just the bodies that we found are over 200. So it's they had to hire one of those trailer trucks and put bodies in one of those trucks. It's not the proper storage for human remains. But that's something that doesn't bother them, you know? So you have the authorities reject filing. That's the beginning, that the authorities don't want to file the report. When people go to file the report, they usually tell you to go back home. If they're nice, they will tell you, we'll call you. Or if they're not so nice, they will tell you that your missing son or daughter were criminals and what are you doing there? And that you should be ashamed and go back home. So the authorities would send you back with nothing. And normally, people just give up. So we have then the work of the Colectivo. Like I said, we started figuring out what we were supposed to do because in the beginning we didn't have a clue. Imagine all of a sudden they tell you your son is missing, or your son is kidnapped, and you start looking for him, and you haven't got a clue where to start. You go and you think the authorities are going to look for him, and it's like when I went to the police agency first to file the report, and I saw the reaction. I have to be honest with you. I mean, if I had reported the theft of a car, they would have done much more than they did in my son's case. And I insisted, and they did it. I didn't get them to do anything because they said no. The police doesn't want to do an investigation. We already told them, and they don't want to. And you say, but how come the police doesn't want to? Well, that's Mexico for you. So political pressure and awareness raising, and that's why I'm here, because awareness is essential if you want to change all this. Because one of the things that the government has been very active in is sending people out of the country to cover for all this, to cover all this tragedy and to lie, to deny that it's going on. And they spent a lot of money on that. So that's why awareness is so important. And people are going to say, is that so horrible in Mexico? It is. I mean, people don't even know why. And it's like, is it happening? And why don't you talk to the police? Why? Isn't the police going to do something? And it's so hard to understand. It's so hard to wrap your mind around something like this. But it's because you have a country that has a rule of law, and if something happens, you go to the police and they'll do something. But in Mexico, it's not like that. So we need the world to know. We need outside pressure for the Mexican government to start facing this tragedy and do something about it. And then the collaboration for the creation. We worked on the creation of the law on forced disappearances in Mexico, because there was no law. So it meant that you could disappear a person, and nobody. I mean, you probably go to jail for other kind of crimes that were not related to disappearances. So, and besides all the different outcome of disappearance, there's so many things that happened to the families that needed rearranging, because this affects your whole life. This is not like a death certificate that you have, and that you can go and tell the people at the bank, okay, the person died, and he had a bank account, for example. This is giving you an example. Or for example, in some cases, a child died after the father went missing, or the mother goes missing and leaves a child that is not registered yet. And all these problems that are marginal to the disappearance didn't have a law. And now we created it. And it's like I said, you know, like one of the moms in the group, her son left the bank account, and they started taking the money from the bank account, And she went to investigate and found out it was the manager of the bank. He even issued a card to get the money out. And it took a lot of work to stop that from happening. So it says the search for the disappeared alive, that's the beginning of the search. You try to find them alive, you go to the hospitals, to prisons, because sometimes they put them in prison without a sentence. It happens all the time. And the person can be, the family can think that he's disappeared and maybe he's just in prison. And because sometimes the cartel use them for like the decoy, they put them in the prison in place of another criminal. There are prisons in Mexico that are managed by the cartels. That's unbelievable. And they call them autogobierno. I mean that it's governed by its own inmates. Search for the disappeared alive, like I said, and then dead in clandestine graves or morgues, etc. But in this particular aspect of the search is where the Colectivo decided to make a change, a huge change in Veracruz. We had the press conference. We do a lot of press conferences because we have to be very, very, very outspoken about this, and it helps us. You know, it has made a place for us in society. Right now, we have a voice, but we have fought so hard to get it, and we have had to be very strong and brave, because there are a lot of challenges and dangers when you talk about these kind of things in Mexico. So, well, in the group, like over 1,500 interviews and awareness raising workshops, forensics workshops too. And we have learned the protocols for forensics, the laws, the psychosocial support, and we have also had social self-help workshops for the moms in the group that are facing this terrible tragedy. It's not easy because this disappearances, I mean, what you go through, it requires all your energy when you don't have any. It requires all your courage. And what you want to do is just lie in bed all day. It makes you get up and do something when really, 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 in your heart of hearts, you just want to lie down and let life go by. And sometimes you wish for the worst for your own self. But at that time, at that particular time, when you don't have any energy or any courage or any kind of, let's say, feeling for life, you're supposed to be strong and fight back. So we have this, we do an annual Mother's Day march. And what you see here is the pictures of the posters and a picture of the marches. Because Mother's Day is particularly painful for us, you know, to have this vacuum, this void. On Mother's Day, it's really terrible. So we march so as not to feel so left out by the society celebrating and all that. And it's good that everybody celebrates, but we have to march to commemorate. You see this? I don't see, there's a little kid, 2 years old, looking for his mom, but I don't see him in the picture. So we do that every year. And also on Christmas, we put up a Christmas tree with the pictures of the missing. We visit the prisons to see if there is somebody that knows, you know, some kind of information on the missing, or if there is somebody that is taken for missing and he's there. This is what we issue with the information of the missing person and the phones and social media. So we began this. Like I told you before, the search for them, but like I said, in clandestine graves. And we call it Search and Location with Dignity and Respect Brigade, because this has to be done with all the dignity and respect that a person in that condition deserves. So you have here, this is the way we search is not very sophisticated. It's completely basic. We use a construction rod. It's made into a T like this because we have to hit it on top. We hammer it all the way down into the ground, and then we pull it up by those handles. And once we take it out slowly so that we don't lose the smell on the bar, on this iron bar, and we smell it. And in this particular place at the entrance of Veracruz called Colinas de Santa Fe, we found 156 bodies. Sorry, 156 positive graves in an amount of 298 bodies, which is actually a little over 300 because 4 of the bodies didn't have a skull, and they usually what they count is how many heads you find, because they figure, okay, so if we find the skull, it means that the person is dead for sure, because you find an arm or a leg doesn't necessarily mean the person is dead. So this is the place. It's next to a residential area. So actually the residential area surrounds it. And you have the Port Authority next to it, which is surveillance zone. It means that it has to, they have all kinds of surveillance all day long and all year round. And how did this happen? They knew, and they were part of it. See, this is, we smell the construction bar. And if you get the smell like of decay, we make a hole in the ground and try to locate the remains. Once we find them, we tell the forensics team with us, because we cannot touch the remains, to exhume the remains from the grave. So we supervise the work of the forensics. We supervise the genetic profiles. We, as a whole, we bring light to the darkness of the lives of the families who lost their loved ones in such an inhumane and atrocious way. It's important to find all those people lying buried in clandestine graves. Take them out, bring them back to their families, because the clandestine grave is like I was saying before. It's like the annihilation of the person completely. It's trying to erase you from the face of the planet. That they don't even leave your name. You know, like losing your identity is losing everything. And this is what that's why, the reason why they put people in clandestine graves, to completely erase them. But when we take them out and bring them back to the family, it steals the triumph from the perpetrators, and brings the victims back to the families. So we close this circle of uncertainty. There are pictures here. You see what you see on top, they look like crosses. They're not. They're actually the ones that we use to hammer into the ground to smell for decay. Like you have over there, a lot of pictures, some of the personal items of the people buried in the graves. We found so far 12 snakes in the site, ranging from 1 meter to 1.5 meters. Big snakes. You see us working over there. That's me on top over there with a shovel over here too. And the bones that we find, we try not to touch them. That did that only for the picture, but normally we don't touch them. And this is, we found in that place an image from hell. I can imagine that. That's exactly how hell looks. There's no other way to explain it. You open the grave, you find the personal items, you find the bodies blindfolded, that obviously they've been tortured. So what these people saw before dying was sheer horror. And it's one of the things that we try to take away from the perpetrators, you know, that this triumph that they think they had by putting this person go through all that, they thought that we'd never find them, but we did. So this is, you see some of the moms there. We take turns on the search. You cannot bring a lot of people on the searches. It's only like 18 to 20. We have some of the personal items, like a girl's shoe over there. An ID from work. This is a cable service. And in general, we found so many personal items in those graves. And the life of so many people, because 298 is a lot. So what we do normally, some of the things that we do in the group, we take samples from the families to do profiling on the DNA. Of course, we don't do it. We bring it to the authorities to do. Okay. We do this because we need to have a bigger universe of samples that we can match the findings to the families, and then we can have positive matching. So far, we have we've made like 2,500, and we need a lot more. Obviously, we need thousands more, and identified. From the 298, 24 have been identified and sent back home. How do we fund our work? Well, sales, secondhand clothes, bingo brunches, and fundraisers in general. We sell food in the parks and the fairs and on the beach, and this is the way we fund our searches. It's hard work on two fronts, but we manage. We are very, very resilient. Moms are a different breed. I don't know. I don't want to sound like, okay, the mom issue, the mother figure. No. But it just so happens that in the group we are all mothers. We have the Christmas tree, because that's another. Every time there is a date that everybody celebrates, for us is hard. So we put up this tree, and we try to make an impact. Dissemination is a valuable instrument, it says. It is imperative that international organizations and governments are informed about the human crisis the Mexicans are facing at this moment, you know, and for quite a while, because the war on drugs has been going on for over 12 years now. So we have to put pressure on the government, and we have to fight for solutions and answers, and we have to try to bring international help to this, because we are facing, this is a catastrophe. If it had been a natural catastrophe, we'd get a lot of international help. Well, if you say, well, this was an earthquake or it was a hurricane, you get a lot of people helping. So why aren't we getting that kind of help? This is a catastrophe, a humanitarian catastrophe, the worst that Mexico has faced in these modern times. And I think, and we have to shift this all this paradigm that Mexico and Mexicans are, you know, the usual story that Mexicans are violent or whatever. No, that's not true. There is violence in Mexico, but we have to eradicate it, and we need everybody to participate in this. The more people we get into this, the faster it's going to happen. I know it's a huge challenge, but we have to start getting everybody on board. At least the mothers of the collective, we are there. We are working for Mexico, because we're not only working for the disappear, we're working to change things and to have more activism, because that's what's necessary in these times of tragedy, that we need activism. We need everybody to do something. No matter how small, there's always an outcome to whatever you do. There's always a consequence, and it can be positive or it can be negative. But we are looking for the positive consequences of activism. We need people to be active from all walks of life, from all over the planet. We don't know where the good idea, the brilliant, the creative is going to come from, but we do need it in Mexico. And right now, I just want to thank you all and thank Raz and the faculty and the center. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, this is the contact. Like Solicito de Ver, Colectivo Solicito, and the phone number. So if you have any question, please, 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 please.
Does anybody have any questions?
Hi. I'm wondering if, I guess, of all the women that are a part of the Mothers Collective, how many of them have found their children? And have any of them found them alive?
These graves that we found, 4 children belong to the group. And alive from the group, nobody yet. But we did find a little girl, 7, and a boy, over 20. But other than that, no. Yeah, but I think just 1 is enough. Yeah. Any other questions?
I will again, unless there's someone
We got one.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I remember when the whole Ayotzinapa 43 happened, and it exposed a lot of corruption and institutional corruption, and there was a big outcry from, I feel like, the international community, because it got a lot of international news. But then it kind of just died off. Or are you proposing any like institutional reforms to kind of change the police corruption at the local, municipal, and state level?
Yeah, it's true. With Ayotzinapa, it was huge all over the world. And we thought that would bring a lot of changes. We had this incredible hope that finally, which was, you know, we felt sorry for the boys, really. But at the same time, we thought maybe now they're going to do something. No, it's just because the government, Peña Nieto, who was the president back then, he was so corrupt, couldn't care less. He just pretended to be doing something. Actually, they didn't do anything. They hid all the evidence, and they made it was a terrible case. So yes, what you say about the police, how to, because actually that's where you have to start making the changes at the basic level. You know, the municipal police and all that. And in Mexico, it's just for start, but you have to change. I think most people that are working in the what do you call it over here? The police and the military, it's necessary to train them and to teach them human rights too. Because human rights are essential in that kind of work. And they don't have any idea. They think people don't deserve to live. That's why they go around doing these raids, because they think, okay, these are not my children, so what do I care? And that's one of the things you have to teach the law enforcement, that everybody, that lives are important. And freedom is important too. Yeah.
So besides going out to vote for, let's say, more internationally engaged and compassionate political leaders in our own country, what can we do from this side of the border, from the United States, that would make a difference?
Yeah, like Matt said in the morning, go some kind of activism that makes you visible in front of the embassies, put up posters or something, and send out the pictures that we have. I don't know, sometimes I would say you'd have to be creative, because there are many things that people do here. I've been looking around, and you have a lot of ideas that you can apply. And whatever brings some attention to us and makes it visible, that's exactly what we need. And it's just like I said, try to be creative about it. And I think you have a treasure trove of ideas here on campus.
And
Yeah.
also, I'd like to add, question the strategy of the Plan Verita and the war on drugs. Like talk to government officials, and try to find out what's really going on. Like what is the U.S. doing to help support the military in Mexico, and how is this contributing to the human rights problem? I think that's important too.
Yeah, exactly that. Get the Americans to change that point of view, that it's Mexico's fault that people are using drugs here. It's not. It's a health issue. They have to address it in a proper way. Mexico can disappear, but the problem is not going to disappear. And that's important. That that Plan Merida is one of the things that they have to really get rid of, at least for the time being.
Thank you. So you talk about dignity and about looking for those graves and security, but those people who make these questions public, they are the ones who become vulnerable and can become targets. So my question is have any of these brave moms, for example, been attacked or threatened, and who is the one that ensures your security?
Actually, when we were coming out of the gravesite, it happened like a month into the beginning of the searches that we had found some bodies already, and a couple of I don't know how to call them. I would say criminals. They were aiming at us with big weapons, like the kind they use in the army. And I told the driver of the van, we were in a van. There were 18 moms, and it was mostly, they all belonged to the group, and the driver. And I told him, keep going, don't stop, because they meant business, these people. So we kept going, and then I told the moms, look, this is dangerous, and I don't want to be responsible for if something happens to you. And it's terrible, because some of them have even grandchildren that belong to their missing children. And I told them, if you cannot come tomorrow, I understand, but I will come back. And they said, no, we're not leaving you alone. Let's not talk about it. And next day, it was like a business as usual for us. We do that. I had a lot of problems with the last governor. He went after me, and I had to leave the country for a while. So, like I say, I try to be a moving target. I guess that's my my security, my safety, let's say my strategy. It's not very good. But so far I manage, and I don't want to have a bodyguard, because that would meant that the government would assign them to me, because I cannot pay for a personal bodyguard, you know. So I don't want somebody from the government looking after me. But it's, yes, the governor himself even paid to a very well-known journalist in Mexico to write a piece, and you know, about the group and about me. It's, you don't know. I mean, these people would do anything, and but fortunately, he's not the governor anymore. So that threat is, I hope it's, at least for the moment, is not dangerous for me. Any other question?
Pero te preguntaría en español.
It's okay.
¿Saben? ¿Ustedes qué están haciendo para recibir ayuda del gobierno? O sea, entiendo que tienen el disappear de las personas y que hay ciertos campos de concentración en los que se encuentran los cuerpos y en que todos están como bajo tierra. Pero ¿qué hacen ustedes para recibir ayuda del gobierno? ¿Cómo recibir un criminalística? ¿Cómo recibir ayuda del Estado para que las acompañen? Porque entiendo que es una zona criminal y ahí van a haber muchísimas personas que las pueden agredir, como
Sí.
ustedes qué están haciendo acá, no es su territorio. O sea, yo no pertenezco a México, yo soy de Colombia y entiendo su situación porque también sucede en Colombia. Entonces, a eso me refiero, ¿ustedes qué hacen o el gobierno de qué forma les ayuda? Porque, por ejemplo, en Colombia hay pueblos en los que no entra el Estado, pero hay unas bandas criminales en las que funcionan como tipo Estado.
Autodefensa.
Exacto, que funcionan como autodefensas. Entonces, ¿qué hacen ustedes como para recibir el verdadero apoyo del Estado y no recibir apoyo de estas autodefensas que a la final ellos saben dónde están los cuerpos y simplemente están ayudando a que ustedes se más o menos pierdan y digan como, hey, venga, no están encontrando nada, váyanse de la zona porque lo que están haciendo es alebrestándome el negocio, como se
Sí,
diría.
sí. Yeah. She's asking me about the. Do you want somebody to translate?
translate.
Okay.
So for those in the room, good evening. Her basic question in a nutshell was, what is the group doing collectively to join forces with some kind of agencies through the government, not directly from the federal government, but from some kind of allies and agency that are local to those municipalities for assistance and kind of support in what they, carry out their mission?
Yeah, we use the federal police on the site. After the threats and all that, they had to come and protect us, and actually that's protection we have. Not a lot. Don't think we have an army there. No. But we do get the police, the federal police, to help out, and which is, it's a group. But every day we leave. Everybody goes to her house, and that's when we are by ourselves. But on this gravesite, we have the so-called protection of federal police. Also, the forensics work is done by the government, because you cannot. There are very strict rules when it comes to the human remains. You cannot touch them if you are not an expert, a forensics expert. The government is very nonsensical when it comes to that, because, for example, they say, no, you're not supposed to touch the bodies. But the criminals, they do, no problem. And but we use the government for that too. Yes, it's impossible to do away with the government, which is a tragedy in itself. But yes, we have that. That is not help because they have to. But yes, we use them on the.
And might I add to that? You see, like in some cases, they have self-defense. Oh, sorry. In some cases, they have self-defense groups formed, but what the government has done traditionally is disarm these groups. So they have actually imprisoned a lot of these members, And then the ones that aren't disarmed, the narcos have actually infiltrated these groups too. So many times it's a very confusing situation and you don't know who is who. So
Yeah. Yeah, those, they call them self-defense, autodefensa. Those groups are made up of a lot of criminals sometimes. And in some cases, they might work for the community. But we don't have that. Veracruz is a city. Most of those groups are out in the rural areas. And Veracruz is a city. It has a lot of police, which makes no difference, really. So any other question? Yeah? No, feel free to ask us. This is what I'm here for. Please, 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 please. I love it when you ask. It means
Okay. I guess my next question is, to what extent has your mother's group worked with other mothers groups in other states in Mexico, or other mothers groups outside your country, like Argentina or Bosnia or what have you? And have those other groups helped your group at all in terms of your strategies and stuff?
well, actually, there is a movement made up of a different mothers group, of like 76 groups from all Mexico. So we got together and got the law. That's implemented. We designed it, and because we figure we are the ones who know what to put in the law. And yes, but other than that, not too much. And from outside, nobody. No. But in Mexico, Solicito is very autonomous, very independent. Of course, if other groups wanted to participate with us, we'd be open to it. But for the moment, nobody has offered. At least, besides, in the port city of Veracruz, it's only Solicito and another group, but the other one is very small. So, but like I told you, if somebody else volunteer, we'd be only too happy to let them in.
Are there any chapters like Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, other major worldwide?
Could you start again for the recording? Thanks.
Let me start. Are there chapters of international human rights organizations like Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, or other international human rights organizations in Veracruz, in Mexico, that you've been able to contact and get some both publicity and actual physical assistance?
Yes, there is a United Nations office in Mexico City, but they come to Veracruz from time to time. There is Amnesty too, Human Rights Watch, it's all there, but human rights organizations, I have an issue with that, because they don't do much. They could be doing a lot more. This, making it visible, is important, and they could be doing that, But in general, they've had, the government has used them too, like pretending that it's not happening, and these organizations don't try to set things straight. So that's why I'm not too happy about them in general. But I hope in the near future they will start putting more work into Mexico. More activism from them is necessary. Yeah.
So I guess I have a two-part question. I guess the cross that you drill down into the ground to pick up and then smell to see if there's any decay or bodies underneath there, I guess that's the most economical way to go about this process?
Yeah, it is. You could use one of those radars, geo radars, but we don't have that kind of technology. And the dogs that they use, it's incredible, but didn't work. We tried the dogs in Colinas, and they didn't find any graves there. So yes, the hammer and the arm bar that we use has been effective. Once I found the body by the noise it made, you know, the sound of the friction of the bone against the iron, and I noticed, and there it was. So it's effective. Of course, if we had a radar, it'd be a lot better, because people tell me that they are effective, but I don't know, because it depends on the soil, depends on the layout, and might not. For example, those bodies were 2.5 meters deep. It's pretty deep even for a radar. I don't know, but they are expensive. The government has some, so maybe if we try to get one, they will eventually, like in a year or 2 or 3, bring us one for our use. But so far we use that, and it's been very effective.
I'm sorry, this is just a sort of a technical, you said 2.5 meters deep?
Yes.
So these graves must have been dug not by hand, the mass grave, right?
Yeah.
Because that's
Yeah.
a lot of work.
They say that sometimes they make the victim make the hole, you know, make the grave. In some parts, it looks like they use machinery in some parts of this place. But whoever did this was really trying, you know, to have this disappear. They really made a big effort, 2.5 meters at least, because the criminality in Mexico changes from one place to the other. For example, in Tamaulipas, they don't bury them like this. They don't bury the bodies. What they normally do is they put them in acid and they degrade the bodies until there's only like little pieces, and they leave those lying around. So the groups in Tamaulipas find a lot of little pieces, and they are very hard to get any DNA from because they're so degraded. And sometimes they burn the bodies, and it's the same situation. But in Veracruz, in this particular place, we found the bodies. Most of them were complete. Although they seem to be, it's so hard to say, you know, that they chopped they severed the bodies and put them in bags. Even that was good because some of the bodies had tissue and they were more complete because of that. It helped them a little from the weather and all the elements. So yes, it's the criminals in Mexico. They have different strategies to dispose of the bodies, and that's why I think in this Colinas de Santa Fe, the authorities were there. They had to be there because they brought all these people to this place. For example, the grave I told you about a little earlier, that had 15 bodies in it. How do you bring 15 people and nobody notices? I guess they had to have the participation of the government directly.
So we have one question on Zoom from one of our students who's joining us from online.
Okay.
So this is from Jean-Paul, and he asked, Mexico is a member of the Inter-American Convention on the Forced Disappearance of Persons adopted in June 1994 in Brazil. Through its articles, it says violations of the convention can be brought to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. So his question is, do you think suing the government or pursuing action against it is another way of pushing the Mexican government to prevent this form of violence?
He is right. I mean, that's good that he mentions that. But you have to understand, Mexico would sign any agreement, any kind of protocol. Government doesn't have any problems with that. The problem is implementing it. It's Mexico, for example, they belong to the United Nations, and but what they do is they tell these organizations that nothing is going on, and they have told me when I had a meeting with the people from the United Nations, and I said, how can you say that they are lying to you? You're not children. I mean, this is so offensive to hear. And they say, but Mexico puts in a lot of money. Mexico is one of the biggest contributors to these organizations. So it's hard to talk, let's say, badly about a country that gives you a lot of money. And that's why Mexico can belong to any kind of organization, and they are not going to make Mexico accountable. It's the problem. Even with this, I remember with the Tokyo Protocol for climate change, Mexico subscribed it, and they didn't do anything. They would sign any paper as long as it makes them look good. Yeah.
I just wanted to follow up on the questions about the search that you've conducted. And obviously you have been more successful than the police in that area. How do you just go to different places, or do you have is there any information that maybe you've gathered that you have been able to find the spots where these graves are?
Yeah, now that you mentioned that, it's yeah, we get a lot of information, a lot of rumors. There's also information from the perpetrators. Sometimes if they do go to jail, sometimes they give information. But that's not the way we have found. Like you saw Mother's Day March, we go out and march. On Mother's Day 2016, as we were going to start marching, the two men got out of a pickup truck and approached us and handed out a piece of paper. We had no idea what it was. And then we were getting ready. It was a big, huge group. And so we were so busy, we didn't even look at the faces of the guys. And when I saw the paper, it had a map. And that map was Colinas de Santa Fe. Then when the press found out, they started referring to it as Mother's Day macabre present, which was, well, they put it that way. It hurts, but at the same time, we found all those people that were lying buried in that clandestinity that was so horrible. So it was good at the end, you know. But yes, that's the way we found this particular place. Two men. I don't know the reason why they did it, but at least they gave it to the right people. And I'm glad they did.
Lucia, can you tell us about your button that you're wearing?
This is my son. Well, there you go. It's hard. It's always hard to talk about him. Like I said before, he was kidnapped, and at that moment I was traveling, and his girlfriend called me and told me, look, I don't know where he is, but this is very strange, very unusual. He doesn't answer the calls, he doesn't answer the messages, something's going on. And I came back to the country immediately because I knew there was something. It never happened like that. I tried to get in touch and didn't get an answer, so I decided to go back to Mexico. And that's where I was confronted with the truth, with the reality of that my son was missing. And they asked for ransom, whatever. It's like it happened so fast. And at the same time, it was so hard for me. At the moment, I went into a deep depression. It was the darkest you can imagine dark. I don't, it's impossible to imagine something like that. It's just impossible. There's no amount of imagination that can go into something like that. Like to have your heart completely ripped out of your body, like in 1 second, that you know something is so wrong, and that you are confronted with your own vulnerability and with your lack of resources. Because if I had the power, I would get everybody to search for him, but I didn't. I was just like everybody else. And so at that time, I remember I would go, my day would start so early. At 7 o'clock, I was on my way to go to the police agency or to the attorney. And from one place to the other, I spent all day long in those places. And when I came back home, I would just throw myself on the floor, literally. And I don't know how I managed to go one day and then the other, but I did. And that's when I started, I kept on and on like this until it became unbearable. The body can take just so much punishment. There's a point when it's so hard, you don't even want to cry, because cry drains you of all the energy, but there's no way you can stop crying. And I started reading and reading and reading a lot of things, because that was the only thing I could do. When I was at home, I read a lot because I was trying to find answers. And all of a sudden it hit me after meeting some of the moms. And on a certain visit I made to the police, that I met some of them, and they were lost. They were worse than me, because I knew when the attorney talked to me, or when the police talked to me, I understood the language. I understood what they said. But these moms didn't understand. And they had a lot of problems. They had personal problems. They had children left from the disappeared, and even financial issues, health problems, a lot of health problems. And I figured, wow, they were, if it was possible, they were in worse shape than I was. And I thought that I was being very, 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 very selfish, thinking about myself, when there were so many other moms going through the same thing, and even worse than I was at the moment. And that shifted the focus completely. That minute, it was like epiphany, it hit me. Enough of yourself, enough of, my pain. Because it was not even, it was not even about my son. My son wouldn't want me to be doing anything like this. It was me. And if my son could tell me, he would tell me, stop it. Go home. Relax. That's what he would say. But that would be impossible for me. I'd rather be dead than give up. I'm not the kind of person that takes things lying around, like just lying down. I'm not that kind of person. So even it was in the beginning, people would tell me, why are you doing this? Are you crazy? You know the risks you're facing, the dangers? I said, but it's my son. I mean, how can I think about my own integrity, my own well-being, if my son is missing? That didn't have any logic to it, because I'd rather lose my life. If they had told me, the criminals, it's your life or his, I would say, don't even ask. But I said, this is about my pain too much. I have to think about others. Of course, the pain is still there, but it's so much bigger now that it got so huge, because I think about all the other missing children in all of Veracruz, not only the ones that we have in the group, because I think about them, and it's so much, and I'm so little, that I finally understand that it's not about me, and I am here to work. This is my mission. I got to do this. I have like the moral obligation, like we were saying in the morning, the moral obligation of making it visible, of getting the word out, putting pressure, getting like that, the law that we got to implement it, and everything I can do, and everything that is in my power to do, I got to do. There's no other way to go for me. And that's why I'm really happy here. I'm very hopeful when I see these gatherings. So there's a lot of solidarity that you are here listening, and this is the way we get ripple waves going on all over. That's the way things are born, like this. And you don't see it happening, but I do. And yes, like when I shifted the focus, it began to change for me and also for the disappeared. Because it happened to me and it happened to many other moms, and we are fighting and making a difference. So that's the moment when things began to change. Before us, mothers were, going through all this quietly, because I understand it's difficult, it's hard. You need to have a family that backs you, that is behind you. And some of them don't, because it's one of the first things you lose, your family. They try to stay away from all these kind of problems. But my family stayed behind me. And if they didn't anyway, I would go. I will keep going. Because for some people like me, this is there's nothing like fighting for what you need to fight for. Any other question?
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Please,
You
please.
being here, like I said before, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
As I said at the beginning, we have a panel tomorrow in Atlantic City, and Lucia will speak there as well, and other people on immigration, refugees, and state violence. So you're invited to join tomorrow as well. Thank you.